I stood at the airport gate waving goodbye to my wife Stephanie and my brother Kevin. Stephanie leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Have a great trip, honey." Kevin gave me a playful shove and laughed. "Bring me back something cool, man." I smiled and nodded. They smiled too, but their smiles weren't for me. They were smiling at the thought of what they were about to do. While I was halfway across the world on business, they were planning to empty our joint bank account and disappear. What they didn't know was that I had already seen everything coming, and the moment they tried to stab me in the back, they were walking straight into a trap I'd spent months preparing. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal. It was about loyalty. It was about realizing that sometimes your worst enemies are the people closest to you. Have you ever trusted someone only to find out they were plotting against you? Drop a comment and tell me your story, and don't forget to subscribe for more true revenge stories that hit right where it hurts. My name is Jason Miller. I'm 39 years old, and I work in cybersecurity out of San Diego, California. It's not the flashiest job in the world, but it pays the bills and then some. I've spent my entire adult life building something stable, a career, a home, a future. Something real. I met Stephanie when I was 30. She was vibrant, charming, and made me feel like I could finally relax after years of grinding through the tech world. We dated for 2 years before tying the knot. Back then, everything felt easy. Natural. I thought I had found my person, the one who would stand beside me no matter what. And then there was Kevin, my younger brother, always a bit reckless, a bit impulsive, but he had a good heart, or so I believed. When Kevin lost his job at a local marketing firm, he came to me embarrassed and defeated. Said he just needed a place to crash for a few weeks until he got back on his feet. Stephanie was the first to say yes. "Of course he can stay with us," she insisted. "We're family." Weeks turned into months, 6 months to be exact. Kevin still wasn't working, still wasn't paying rent, still wasn't making much of an effort, if I'm being honest. But family is family, right? You don't turn your back on blood just because things get inconvenient. I tried to stay patient, tried to believe that Kevin would figure it out, that Stephanie was just being supportive, that the tension I felt creeping into the corners of our house was just stress. Normal stress. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The shopping bags Stephanie would tuck away quickly when she thought I wasn't looking. The way Kevin started acting like he owned the place, inviting friends over, eating out, constantly spending money he didn't have. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that I was paranoid, that I was tired from working long hours. But there's a funny thing about instincts. You can ignore them for a while. You can reason them away. You can bury them under a mountain of excuses until one day they refuse to be ignored any longer. It was a Tuesday night when it all clicked. I stayed late at the office, running a few routine security audits. Bored, I logged into our home network just to check for any weird activity, and there it was, a flurry of encrypted messages, a second phone number tied to Stephanie, and Kevin's device communicating with hers when they were supposed to be in separate rooms of the house. My stomach dropped. I wasn't just imagining things. Something was happening behind my back, something bigger than I had ever feared. And if I was right about what they were planning, I wasn't just going to sit back and let it happen. I was going to make sure they regretted ever thinking they could outsmart me. After that night, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't pretend everything was normal. Every glance Stephanie and Kevin exchanged across the dinner table felt loaded. Every hushed conversation behind closed doors made my skin crawl. I knew I needed more than gut feelings. I needed evidence. So I started small routine stuff for someone in my field. I upgraded the home network's monitoring system, tracked device activity, logged text messages, mapped out access patterns. Stephanie's phone, Kevin's tablet, they were both talking to the same hidden server. Late at night, always when they thought I was asleep. It wasn't just small talk either. It was planning, plotting. One night after they went out to run errands, I accessed Stephanie's backup cloud account. She thought she had deleted her conversations. She hadn't. I sat there in my office staring at the words that turned my stomach. "Once he's gone to Japan, we drain the account, split it, start fresh." There it was in black and white proof. It wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't just a bad decision made in a moment of weakness. It was premeditated, calculated, and it wasn't just Stephanie. It was Kevin too, my own brother. For a few minutes, I just sat there frozen, feeling like the walls around me had cracked open and the cold night air was rushing in. I thought about confronting them, throwing open the door, shoving the proof in their faces, demanding answers. But then I realized something. They weren't just willing to betray me. They were counting on me being too trusting, too blind, too slow to see it coming. If they thought I was weak, then maybe it was time to let them think exactly that, long enough to show them just how wrong they were. I started planning. First, I opened a private account at a separate bank, one they didn't know existed. Over the course of several weeks, I gradually transferred almost all our joint savings into it, just a little bit at a time, small enough to fly under the radar, small enough that the monthly statements didn't look suspicious. By the time my trip was 2 weeks away, the joint account only had about $22,000 left, plenty to keep appearances normal, plenty to bait the trap. Next, I tightened the smart home system-adjusted permissions, set silent alerts, programmed lockdowns I could trigger remotely. Every camera, every lock, every thermostat, every light switch, they all answered to me alone now. And then I dug a little deeper into Kevin's situation. Turns out Kevin hadn't just been lazy about finding work. He had been actively collecting unemployment benefits while living under my roof. Benefits he wasn't supposed to be eligible for, thanks to the under-the-table side gigs he picked up. All it would take was one anonymous tip, one little nudge in the right direction. I wasn't ready to destroy him yet. Not until he crossed the line, but I wanted to be ready. When the day of my trip came, I kissed Stephanie goodbye, clapped Kevin on the back, told them I'd miss them. Inside, I felt nothing, just a cold, focused determination. At the airport, I logged into our systems one last time. Everything was green. Everything was armed. I boarded the plane to Tokyo and leaned back in my seat, feeling strangely calm. Let them think they'd won. Let them think they were smarter. Let them make the first move. They were about to learn the hard way. You never try to rob a man who spends his days finding invisible threats and eliminating them without leaving a trace. And as the plane lifted into the night sky, I knew the real game had just begun. The first few days in Tokyo passed like a strange, silent countdown. I went through the motions, attended meetings, shook hands, smiled for photos, but my mind was always back home. Every night after dinner, I'd slip back to my hotel room, pour myself a cup of green tea and open my laptop. I had access to everything. The front door camera, the smart locks, the banking apps. At first there was nothing, no movement, no suspicious activity. It almost made me second-guess myself. Almost on the fourth night, I logged in around midnight, Tokyo time, early morning back home. And there it was. Movement at the front door, Kevin stepping out and pacing the driveway, talking animatedly on his phone. Stephanie following a few minutes later, purse slung over her shoulder. I watched as they drove off together. Tracked their phones through the apps they had forgotten were still connected to the home Wi-Fi. First stop, a local branch of our bank. I felt my jaw tighten. They weren't even trying to hide it. Less than an hour later, I got the alert. A full transfer request from our joint account straight into two separate personal accounts. Stephanie's and Kevin's. It was done. They'd taken the bait. The betrayal wasn't just a theory anymore. It was real. Signed, sealed, and digitally timestamped. And with that final move, they crossed a line that there was no coming back from. I sat there staring at the confirmation screens, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. No more guessing. No more hoping. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. They had made their choice. And now it was my turn. I activated the first phase of my counterplan. Changed the passwords, locked down the security system. Triggered silent alerts that would keep recording every move they made inside the house. They didn't even know they were already locked out of most of the systems, didn't even realize they were being watched. I booked an earlier flight home, changed it quietly without alerting anyone. I wouldn't give them a second longer than necessary. As I closed my laptop that night and leaned back against the hotel bed, I felt it settle in my bones. This wasn't just about protecting my money anymore. It was about reclaiming my self-respect, about showing them and myself that I wasn't someone you could walk all over tomorrow they would think they had won. Tomorrow they would start packing, planning their escape. Tomorrow they would realize they weren't half as clever as they believed. And I would be waiting, calm and ready, when their world collapsed around them. The morning after the transfer, I boarded the earliest flight back to San Diego. It was a long, quiet ride. No movies, no music. Just me sitting there thinking about every decision that had led to this point. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way you might expect. I wasn't shaking with rage. I wasn't daydreaming about screaming matches or violent confrontations. No, I was cold, focused, resolute. This wasn't about yelling or fighting. It was about closure, about drawing a line so deep in the sand that it could never be crossed again. When the plane landed, I didn't even go straight home. First, I stopped by my lawyer's office. I had already prepared most of the paperwork remotely, but now it was time to make it official. Filing for divorce, submitting evidence, setting everything in motion. Then I stopped at a local coffee shop near my neighborhood, opened my laptop and logged into the house system. The live feed flickered on inside. Stephanie and Kevin were moving quickly, nervously, suitcases half-packed, paperwork strewn across the kitchen table. Their faces tight with stress. They thought they had pulled it off. They thought they were in the final stretch before disappearing with the money. They had no idea the walls were already closing in. I triggered phase 2. First, the smart locks. I remotely reset the entry codes, locking every door and window from the outside. Then the thermostat, cranking the heat up to an uncomfortable 85 degrees, just enough to make them sweat without realizing why. The television screens across the house flickered to life one by one, all displaying the same simple message. I know. Kevin dropped his suitcase. Stephanie grabbed her phone, frantic, trying to call me, too late. I had already suspended their lines on the family plan, disconnected the house Wi-Fi, routed all mobile traffic through a virtual private network I controlled. They were trapped in a digital prison of my own making. Watching them scramble, watching the panic bloom on their faces, it should have felt satisfying, but honestly, it just felt sad, like watching two people drown in a hole they dug for themselves. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and drove the final few miles home. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Kevin peeking through the blinds like a scared child. Stephanie yanked the curtain back and mouthed something at him, frantic. I took my time getting out of the car, straightened my jacket, grabbed the envelope of printed evidence from the passenger seat, and walked to the front door. When I entered the house, the heat hit me first, a wall of heavy, sticky air. Stephanie rushed forward. "Jason, it's not what you think," she stammered. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Kevin tried to step in, blustering something about misunderstandings and loyalty. I said nothing, just opened the envelope, laid out the printed text messages, screenshots of the money transfer, audio transcripts from the security recordings, photos of them together at the bank. Their faces drained of color. Stephanie's hands trembled. Kevin's fists clenched, then fell uselessly to his sides. I finally spoke, my voice calm, measured. "You stole from me. You lied to me. You both plotted this for months." They tried to interrupt, apologize, explain. I didn't let them. "This house, it's in my name. The bank account's already secured. The money you took, consider it a severance package because it's all you're getting." I slid 2 documents across the table. One was the finalized divorce petition citing abandonment and financial misconduct. The other was a cease and desist order banning Kevin from my property permanently. Stephanie choked on a sob. Kevin cursed under his breath. I turned to Kevin first. "I suggest you start looking for a lawyer, Kevin, because there's an anonymous tip going to the unemployment fraud department tomorrow morning." His face twisted with fear. "You can't do that," he spat. I smiled. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just sharing what I know." I turned back to Stephanie. "You'll hear from my lawyer by the end of the day. I suggest you start packing for real this time." I left them there, standing in the ruins of what they thought was a perfect plan. I didn't shout, I didn't threaten, I simply ended it. And it was one of the most liberating moments of my life. The next few days moved quickly, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was running to catch up. I was ahead, in control. Stephanie moved out within 48 hours. No dramatic farewell, no long emotional speeches, Just a few cardboard boxes and the heavy sound of a door closing behind her. Kevin disappeared even faster, packed his beat-up car with what little he had, and sped off like the house was cursed. I didn't chase them. I didn't call. I didn't send one more text asking why I had all the answers I needed. The divorce proceedings were almost laughably one-sided. Between the financial evidence, the recordings, and the lawyer's meticulous documentation, Stephanie had no ground to stand on. She tried to fight for a portion of the remaining assets, claiming emotional distress, but the court wasn't having it. In the end, she walked away with nothing but the $22,000 they had stolen, and even that was a calculated concession. Less than a quarter of what she might have been entitled to if she had played her cards differently. Kevin's downfall was slower, but much messier. A few weeks after he left, he got a letter from the state unemployment office. An investigation had been opened. Someone, an anonymous tipster, had provided evidence that Kevin had been working under the table while collecting benefits. And worse, that he had lied about his living situation to continue receiving aid. He tried to dodge it, of course, ignored letters, skipped phone interviews, but bureaucracy is relentless when it wants to be. Eventually, he was ordered to repay the benefits he had collected fraudulently. Thousands of dollars he didn't have. Penalties stacked up, interest accrued. He ended up selling his car just to cover part of the debt. The rest he filed for bankruptcy within the year. Meanwhile, I stayed exactly where I was, steady grounded. Rebuilding my company, impressed by how I had handled a major security breach, while overseas offered me a promotion, a big one. Senior Director of Cybersecurity based out of their Austin office. New title, new city, new start. I accepted without hesitation. Packing up the San Diego house was bittersweet. It had been home for nearly a decade. It had held so many good memories now, permanently stained by betrayal. But as I loaded the last box into the moving truck, I realized something important. The house wasn't my home anymore. My home wasn't tied to walls or furniture or memories of people who didn't deserve to be there. My home was wherever I chose to build it, moving forward. Austin welcomed me with open arms. The tech scene was thriving. The food was incredible. And for the first time in a long time, I woke up every morning without that tight knot of suspicion in my chest. About 6 months after settling in, I met someone new. It wasn't dramatic. No whirlwind romance or movie magic moment. Just a quiet conversation at a bookstore. An easy laugh shared over coffee. A feeling of calm instead of chaos. Her name was Emily. She wasn't impressed by job titles or bank accounts. She cared about character, about kindness, about honesty. Things I had almost forgotten to value after everything that had happened. We took it slow. Built trust one small moment at a time. No secrets, no games, no hidden agendas. Just two people choosing each other freely, fully. Looking back now, it's almost funny. If Stephanie and Kevin hadn't betrayed me, if they hadn't forced me to rebuild from the ground up, I might never have found this peace. I might never have realized how much more I deserved. Sometimes the worst moments of your life aren't endings. They're invitations, invitations to walk away from what was never really meant for you and step into something so much better than you ever imagined. It's funny how life teaches you the same lesson over and over until you finally learn it the hard way. For the longest time, I believed loyalty was automatic, that if you gave someone love, trust, and opportunity, they'd repay you with the same. But the truth is, loyalty isn't something you can give to someone else. It's something they have to choose day after day, and not everyone will. Some people will see your kindness as weakness. They'll see your generosity as something to exploit, and they'll smile while they're sharpening the knife behind your back. I spent months beating myself up after everything went down, asking where I went wrong, what I could have done differently, what signs I missed. But healing starts the moment you realize their betrayal wasn't about me. It was about them, their choices, their greed, their broken values. It wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Walking away wasn't easy. Watching two people I once loved destroy themselves wasn't satisfying. It was heartbreaking. But sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the ones who choose destruction walk their path alone. Today, my life isn't perfect. No life ever is, but it's mine. Built on trust that's earned, not demanded. On relationships that are real, not convenient. on peace, not paranoia? If you're listening to this right now, maybe you're carrying the weight of someone else's betrayal too. Maybe you're stuck wondering why someone you loved could hurt you so deeply. Let me tell you something. You didn't lose. They did. You didn't fail. They failed to see your worth, and no matter how hard it feels right now, one day you'll look back and realize losing them was the best thing that ever happened to you, because you didn't just survive it, you rose above it. You rebuilt, and you became someone they could never tear down again. Sometimes the greatest betrayal doesn't just show you who they are, it shows you who you are meant to become, not bitter, not broken, but wiser, stronger. Sharper betrayal cracks you open. It exposes the places you ignored for too long. And if you're brave enough to face it, it rebuilds you into someone who can no longer be fooled by false smiles or empty promises. I lost a brother. I lost a wife. But in the ashes of that loss, I found something much more important. I found clarity. I found freedom. I found a life where loyalty isn't something begged for. It's something naturally given by people who deserve to be in your story. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been blindsided by the people you thought would stand by you, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not stupid. You're human, and you deserve better. What did you think of this story? Have you ever had to rebuild after a betrayal? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If you believe loyalty should be earned, not assumed, hit that like button. And if you never want to miss a real story of justice and redemption, make sure you subscribe to Revenge with Max. We have a new story every single day, because sometimes the best revenge is simply living better without them.